It's time for us to discuss the most skilled fighters in mixed martial arts history. This is not a GOAT list. We're not talking about the greats. We're not talking about achievements, records, accomplishments. We're just talking about pure skill. Pure skill. That's it. And I know that there's going to be a lot of people that are not going to like the fact that most of the fighters on my list are modern era fighters. That's right. We do not have any fighters from the 90s, hardly any fighters from the 2000s. That's just kind of how it is. I feel like the game has evolved a lot. We do have some honorable mentions, but I'm going to also just let you guys know that this is not a ranking that I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about 10 fighters. I'm going to rank 10 fighters, and that's it. But I'm not going to really rank them 1, 2. They're kind of like all over the place, just because I think it's just kind of really difficult to rank these guys, especially because some of them are predominant grapplers, some of them are predominant strikers, but I still believe that they should be in here. However, these were the 10 fighters that I could come up with that I believe are the most skilled fighters that have ever walked the planet. Okay, and again, this has nothing to do with durability. It really doesn't have a lot to do with cardio, although pressure definitely is something that is important here. An ability to impose your will, that's definitely important. But, you know, cardio, punching power, like Merab is not on my list, for example, because Merab Dvalishvili, although he, in my opinion, is the greatest bantamweight of all time, he has the best resume at bantamweight, no question about that. It's basically his cardio, his durability, his toughness. As far as his skill goes, he's a great wrestler, but like his striking is not that good. His submission game, his ground and pound ain't that great. You know, it's his cardio. A guy like Dricus du Plessis, another example. Dricus is very good at game planning. He's actually pretty high fight IQ, but I don't really think I view Dricus as like the most skilled fighter ever. Okay, and I have a couple fighters that I'm going to mention that may be controversial for a top 10 all time. But before we get into this, I'm going to do some honorable mentions. Umar Nurmagomedov is an honorable mention. And again, people are going to say, whoa, what? Umar? Dude, Merab Dvalishvili, I think it's clear at this point, is the most built different UFC fighter in history. He's an alien when it comes to his cardio. He just is. He's from a different planet. Umar still took 2 rounds off of him and was supposedly going to be his toughest stylistic matchup. I still think Umar is skill-wise like the most well-rounded fighter in that weight class. Like, he's an amazing striker. He's an insanely good grappler. He has good defensive grappling, but he can also submit people. He has good ground and pound, amazing kicks, decent punches. The reason why he's an honorable mention, and I know people are going to be saying, oh my God, bro said Umar Nurmagomedov, man. Umar Nurmagomedov. What about John Moraga back in the 90s? Or what about Frankie? What about Frankie Edgar? Umar Nurmagomedov is more skilled than Frankie Edgar. Okay? I understand. I get it. Some people aren't going to like it. Dude, Umar Nurmagomedov is more skilled than anyone that fought in the sport before 2015. Straight up, dude. I don't want to hear it. So yeah, he's an honorable mention, but I still think I need to see a little bit more from his striking because his best striking showcase was against the Sandman, who was just out here fainting and playing with the beakers and test tubes. So it's still, you know, to be discussed. We're going to find out more about his striking when he fights people like Sean O'Malley and others. But that's an honorable mention, and you can't hate on that. That's a good honorable mention. It's just that, you know, we need to see a little bit more of his striking. Merab beat him, and people are going to be like, dude, Umar's not one of the most skilled fighters ever. Yeah, he is. Just because you lose to Merab doesn't mean you're... Merab beating people is defying the odds. Merab isn't supposed to beat anyone, but his cardio is that good. You know, that's just how great Merab is. It's not just skills. It's also just attributes, toughness, fucking punching power, right? Cardio. All of these things are really important for fighting as well. I also have to mention John Moraga. John Moraga was an absolute savage, man. And Pedro Munoz is another honorable mention. Pedro Munoz was just a savage. Also, I have Roman Dolidze as well. Roman Dolidze, don't forget about that. Corey the Sandman Sanhagen is also on the list, man. The guy that used to go out there, he switch stances, he bring the beakers and test tubes. All right, Corey the Sandman is going to be in here. Just the flying knees and the marauding style that he had back in the day. Daniel Cormier, let's actually stop bullshitting around. Umar Nurmagomedov is an honorable mention. I have Daniel Cormier as an honorable mention as well. Some people are going to be like, bro, what do you mean he's not top 10? Dude, DC is an honorable mention. I love how, like, I'll make these videos on the top 10 fighters ever, and someone that's, like, number 11 on my GOAT list is, like, being seen as disrespected when it's like, dude, if you're the 11th best UFC fighter ever, that's pretty badass. How many UFC fighters have there been? Like, 20K probably. You're number 11? That's hardly disrespect. Okay? Daniel Cormier, I'm not disrespecting him by keeping him out of the top 10. There's a bunch of lighter weight class fighters, and I know DC was really well-rounded, but I'm sorry, man. Like, it's mostly going to be lighter weight class fighters. There's only one fighter on my list that is, somebody that fought at light heavyweight and heavyweight. That's it. Okay? We're just going to get into it at this point. This is actually going to be my list. Again, we're not ranking these guys. Number 1 is the best, and number 10 is like, he's barely making it. These are just my picks. These are the 10 fighters that I believe are the best ever in no order. But I feel like we have a bit of a tie. I might just do 11 because I think Jose Aldo and Max Holloway, I can't really determine who's better. Okay? And I understand what some people are thinking. People are already rolling their eyes and they're going to be saying things like, oh, Lucas just getting ready to add all of Volkanovski's previous opponents. Stop. It has nothing to do with that. Max Holloway beat Jose Aldo twice. He has a better resume than Jose Aldo, in my opinion. But Max Holloway as a striker, I feel like a lot of it, he relies a lot on his toughness, right? Of course, there's cardio, but Holloway really is a lot of skill. I mean, the toughness is like the one X factor that's not really skill. Part of it's mental, of course, but I'm talking about his chin. But Jose Aldo, in my opinion, is, I don't know, when I think of Aldo, I just think of like a technical maestro to the highest degree, right? So I don't really know who's higher on this list right now, but I may as well just have both of them in my top 11. Fuck it, we're doing 11 fighters because I feel like I need to include Max. And again, people are going to roll their eyes, but I really do think that Max Holloway is a top 10 most skilled fighter ever. He has so many different weapons going for him on the feet. He has pretty good defensive grappling. I mean, nobody has ever ragdolled Max Holloway in before someone says Conor McGregor. Yeah, tadpole Max Holloway we're talking about. Like, come on. Nobody's really ever out-grappled a decent version of Max Holloway. He has amazing wrestling defense. But I still think when it comes to Jose Aldo, I feel like he's perfected more than Max because Jose Aldo, like Max Holloway, has amazing takedown defense, but it's not just amazing. It's like possibly the best takedown defense in UFC history Jose Aldo has. It's to the point to where it's not just, he's a striker with brick wall takedown defense. No, he's like one of the best defensive wrestlers that the sport of MMA has ever seen. It looks so effortless for him. Even into his late 30s, he's still defending takedowns from guys that are, in their physical prime, that are really well-rounded modern era fighters. It's just incredible. And of course, we know he's got some incredible kicks, one of the best leg kickers in MMA history, but also very slick boxing, incredibly fast. I kind of count speed as a bit of a part of your skill set. Just really fast hands, amazing boxing, perfect technique, not only in the striking, but also in the defensive wrestling. And yeah, we don't really see Aldo offensively grapple that often, only a few times in his career. But his defensive grappling is just such a strong part of his game that, we have to look at him as like a well-rounded fighter. You can't just describe Aldo as a striker. He's predominantly a striker, but he's incredibly well-rounded, and I don't think people talk about him enough as a well-rounded fighter. But as far as skills go, he is one of the few guys that was actually fighting in the early 2010s that's on this list, okay? Another fighter that I think deserves to be on this list is Georges St-Pierre. He's probably the guy that is the oldest person on this list, the oldest head on this list. Great striking and just incredibly good offensive wrestling, great defensive wrestling, and amazing grappling control. Really good entries on takedowns. He had pretty good boxing, pretty good counters, great kicks, really good jabs, Superman punches. I think GSP in today's era could possibly be a champion. Now, maybe, I'm just going to say this. I feel like if there's anybody that I'm overrating on this list, it's probably maybe GSP. And I know some people are going to freak out when I say that. But the only reason why I say that is because I still feel like if you were to take George St. Pierre and put him in today's welterweight division, I don't know if that version from the past is a champion. And for that reason, it's like, you know, he was a great offensive wrestler, but I feel like a guy like Bilal Muhammad could stand with him a little bit. And people are going to roll their eyes, but Bilal Muhammad's a modern era fighter. I feel like Kamaru Usman could give him some issues. And I think that GSP, maybe skill-wise, I think he was ahead of his time. He was sort of like Anderson Silva, very ahead of his time. But I still feel like, you know, GSP was very well-rounded. I'm going to throw him on this list. I'm going to put him on this list. It's not a pat on the back. Hey, man, you were a legend. It's not one of those. I think legitimately his skill set was so deep, well-rounded, that he deserves to be on this list as well. Another fighter that I have, Khamzat Chimaev. This is the third or fourth mention. I guess it's 11 fighters now. Khamzat Chimaev. I'm going to bring up Khamzat Chimaev on this list. And people, again, do not get it twisted. We are not talking about resume. We're not talking about, you know, if Khamzat is any title, hey, no title defenses. We're talking about pure skill. I understand that Khamzat Chimaev is not the most skilled striker, although he is an okay striker. Decent. He's a decent striker. I think he's like Khabib. If you were to bring up Khabib Nurmagomedov and you were to tell me that Khabib Nurmagomedov, in my opinion, is a top 10 most skilled UFC fighter ever, I'm going to agree with you. Most people are going to agree with you. People say that Khabib is not a top 5 all-time fighter, but they're talking about his resume. When you actually just bring up his skill, most people agree, okay, Khabib is like top 10 all-time, probably maybe even top 5. He's a one-dimensional grappler. Nobody is that impressed by Khabib Nurmagomedov's striking, okay? So I don't think it's a hot take to say that Khamzat Chimaev, who is a more dominant finisher on the ground, is also a top 10 UFC most skilled fighter ever. I don't think it's a hot take at all. I actually think that that's logically consistent. Everyone talks about the dominance of all these other grapplers, and I don't mean to sound like Joe Rogan, but who does that to Robert Whittaker, really? Nobody does that to Robert Whittaker. Nobody does that to him. Okay, we saw Leon Edwards trip Kamaru Usman and take his back. You know, we kind of caught Usman off guard. Khamzat Chimaev ran at Kamaru Usman and shot a takedown from the get-go. Usman knew it, couldn't do anything about it. Khamzat Chimaev was on his back, finished him. Oh, he didn't finish him. Almost finished him. I think his grappling is the best in UFC history in the upper weight classes, and it's not even close. He's a better grappler than George St. Pierre. He just is. I don't want to even fucking hear it. I don't want to hear it. Okay? Khamzat Chimaev, as far as I'm concerned, is somebody with 100% takedown accuracy. There has never been a situation in the first round where Khamzat Chimaev has not gotten the takedown. It's never happened. Okay, you're going to bring up Ikram Askarov. That's outside of the UFC. We're talking about the big leagues, son. We're not talking about back in the day. We're not talking about, man, when this guy was sparring in his first year of MMA training. No, in the big leagues, Khamzat Chimaev, 100% takedown accuracy. Dude, nobody in MMA is making Robert Whittaker look like that on the ground. Zero. Nobody. And I know De Ridder finished Kevin Holland in the first, but Khamzat Chimaev just did it a little bit more dominantly. All I'm saying is he's so dominant on the ground, nobody can deal with him. We're basically talking about this next middleweight title fight like they're just going to bench warm, they're going to keep the belt warm. It's a foregone conclusion that Khamzat is going to finish Dricus and Sean Strickland no matter who wins that fight. It's a foregone conclusion that Khamzat basically subs everybody. And you're going to tell me that guy's not top 10 most skilled fighters of all time? He's that dominant. He's that dangerous on the ground. He is more dominant and more dangerous than Islam Makhachev. And I know that Makhachev is fighting more skilled fighters in lighter weight classes. Same thing as Khabib. Khabib Nurmagomedov. He was taking Michael Johnson into the third round. Couldn't finish Edson Barboza. And listen, we're talking about different fighters. I'm just saying, when Khamzat Chimaev gets the upper hand, he finishes some of the best, most offensively sound grapplers ever. Okay? So yeah, Khamzat is a top 10 fucking most skilled fighter ever. If you don't agree with that, then I don't understand what we're doing. Okay? He's literally the Mike Tyson of grappling in the upper weight classes. It's just crazy because you just know that there are people that are going to be saying, what are you saying, man? No, he hasn't done enough. We're not talking about title defenses. We're talking about just skill. He finishes Sean Strickland in 1. He finishes DDP in 1. Okay? Khamzat Chimaev, dude, I'm not even glazing. Like, it's just objectively true. 10-8'd Kamaru Usman in round 1. Usman knew he was going to shoot a takedown. Couldn't do nothing about it. Robert Whittaker couldn't do nothing about it. That's just how it is. Okay? Nobody has ever had this level of dangerous grappling. Okay? Nobody. Not Khabib, who was taking Michael Johnson to the 3rd and decisioning Ally Quinta. And dominant grappler. Very dominant grappler. Same with Makhachev. Not first round finishes over some of the most defensively sound wrestlers in the sport's history. That's it. Khamzat, he's in the mix. I think I proved my point. Khabib Nurmagomedov, we may as well get on to Khabib. He's obviously going to make my list as well. Again, I understand Khabib was in a more skilled weight class. We're not here to compare him and Khamzat. I think Khabib Nurmagomedov is obviously a top 10 most skilled fighter of all time. Submission game was there. He could choke you out. He could, hit a triangle from his back against guys like Rufus Justin Gaethje. He was doing Kimuras. Some of the best, if not the best, fence and wall wrestling in MMA history. I think Khamzat Chimaev is better with the double legs, but Khabib was better at just dismantling people up against the fence, just destroying people up against the fence. Also, ground and pound. Maybe the best ground and pound in UFC history. It's definitely up there. Insanely good ground and pound. Unbelievable submissions. Okay, Islam Makhachev is a great grappler. I love how we went from Khamzat, Khabib, and now we're going to compare Khabib to Makhachev. They're different grapplers. I get it. They're different. Okay, again, this is just skill. Khabib was just a little bit more dominant. Makhachev has great submissions. He kind of takes his time a little bit more on the ground. He doesn't really try to beat the shit out of people and make their life miserable on the ground from the moment the fight hits the mat. He's sort of he's sort of a sneakster on the ground. He sort of waits for you to, try to scramble and he'll catch you in a submission or something like that. Khabib Nurmagomedov, the second he took you down, he was mauling you. And this couldn't be more clear than if you watch the Dustin Poirier fight. Okay? Dustin Poirier got his back taken first round by Makhachev. Makhachev's out there. Makhachev's doing his thing. He's chilling. Couldn't really do much to DP. Had a pretty competitive fight with DP. Dustin Poirier's got good grappling. Okay, I know he's the odd man out in the lightweight division. You got all these grapplers, Charles, Arman, Islam, Khabib. He's the odd man out, but his grappling's actually pretty good. Okay? Khabib Nurmagomedov made Dustin Poirier look like a white belt in that fight. Dominated him, was neck cranking him, was beating the shit out of him with ground and pound. It was one of the most dominant performances ever. I've never seen anyone in the lightweight division have that level of skill advantage on the ground over other fighters, right? We talk about Makhachev. Makhachev is amazing on the ground, but I still think Khabib was just that much better, that much more dominant, more well-rounded on the ground. So yeah, I think Khabib is in there, and I understand he doesn't have the greatest striking. I get it, but listen, I don't think this is the most well-rounded list. I think that Khabib Nurmagomedov, he was so good on the ground. And okay, you can be a well-rounded grappler, okay? There's some grapplers like Paul Craig where their thing is Hail Mary submissions. He's not the most well-rounded grappler. And then you have guys like Mateusz Gamrot, who is, a really good pressure grappler with really good smudge, and he'll smudge you into the octagon and he'll smudge you into the fence, but he can't really, hit you with a lot of ground and pound shots. Khabib Nurmagomedov is the most well-rounded grappler ever. Great control, amazing wrestling, solid submission game. He has a lot of different submissions in his arsenal and amazing ground and pound. Okay. And again, when he was grappling with people, their energy would just drain in an instant. So, yeah, I think Khabib, despite the fact that he didn't have the best striking, didn't have great striking, his ability to impose his will on the feet was really good as well. And that's also part of your skill set. Like, some fighters just don't have the ability to impose their will. And Khabib did that, you know? He brought people into his style of fight. He made them very uncomfortable on the feet, had great pressure, and, very solid jab. Khabib had a really good jab. Next up, we have Alexander Volkanovski. This is a clear pick as well. I know that some people are going to be laughing at this, but, like, come on, dude. Like, stop trolling. Obviously, he's the top 10 most skilled fighter of all time. Insanely good boxing. Insane output. Nobody has ever been able to out-tit for tat Volk on the feet in a striking battle. Yeah, Makhachev had his moments, but in a striking battle with the best strikers ever, Max Holloway, Ilia Topuria, Jose Aldo, nobody has ever outside foot battled, out striking fight IQ when it comes to tit for tat. Okay? Nobody's ever been able to outland this guy. All right? Ever. Except for maybe I haven't looked at the numbers with Yair, but he got KO'd, man. Volkanovski was a step ahead. He was a step ahead, man. But listen, striking, insanely good leg kicks, insanely good body kicks, amazing jab, boxing combinations on point, output on point, feints, switching stances. And then it's going to come to the grappling. Maybe one of the best defensive grapplers in MMA history, and also insanely underrated when it comes to his offensive grappling. Volkanovski came into the UFC as an offensive wrestler for the most part. He was taking people down and TKOing him in his first couple of fights. We saw what he did to Brian Ortega, beat the shit out of Brian Ortega on the ground. Also, Yair Rodriguez took him down, neutralized him. And, of course, we have other moments from Volkanovski's career, like against Islam Makhachev, where he was beating up Makhachev when Makhachev, got hit with a good shot and was on his back and couldn't get up to his feet for like a minute and 10 seconds. Volkanovski was just slugging on him. So amazing ground and pound, really good control. Also, Volk has an ability to sort of negate jiu-jitsu. This is like a Dan Hardy take. If you watch Dan Hardy, you kind of know what I'm saying. Volkanovski's like a bit of a hover maxer, where he doesn't really get involved in the jiu-jitsu game. He sort of hovers above your jiu-jitsu guard and your submissions and just kind of doesn't play that game. He sort of hovers above like a wrestler, which allows him to not get caught up in any submissions or anything like that. Really good control, great takedown entries, some of the most underrated ground and pound in UFC history, output on a different level, fight IQ up there as well. And also, let's talk about this. One of the most dominant fighters ever. Okay? Before the Makhachev 1 fight, where he was already, it's not like Volkanovski, he hadn't fought that many fights before the Makhachev 1 fight. No, he was the pound-for-pound king at the time. He had only lost 5 rounds in his entire career. He had 12 fights in the UFC. He was 12-0. He had only lost 5 rounds going into that first fight with Makhachev. That's it. 3 rounds to Max Holloway. Over the course of 15 rounds with Max, he took 12 out of 15. 1 round to Chad Mendes, who dropped him with a big, ugly overhand. And also lost a round to Darren Elkins as well. But Darren Elkins was a freaking marauder, man, back in the day. So Volkanovski, one of the most well-rounded fighters ever. Insanely good everywhere, even in the clinch, wrestling, defensive grappling, submission defense, ground and pound, boxing, brother, kicking, brother, everything. All right? So Volkanovski's also in the mix. Speaking of a guy that beat Volk, though, Ilia Topuria is a top 10 most skilled fighter of all time. Listen, I understand that Ilia Topuria may not have the cleanest, most surgical style, right? Because, we've seen him get pieced up by Volk. We've seen him get pieced up by Max a little bit. But he still KO'd Max Holloway. And that's not only because of his power, although that's a big part of it, but it's because Ilia Topuria, in my opinion, is the highest level boxer the sport of MMA has ever seen. Okay? He really does a good job of sitting down on his punches and flowing through his combinations, slipping punches and countering like an actual boxer, and he's able to accomplish this in MMA. Some of the best hands ever, effortless combinations, insane, devastating power because of it as well, and pretty solid defensively, I think, as well. I mean, Ilia Topuria's good head movement, but the boxing is so OP. It's kind of like Khamzat Chimaev with his grappling. If you're in a battle on the feet with Ilia Topuria, Like, sure, you can maybe out tit for tat him. You can be like 5 strikes ahead of him on the cards if you're one of the greatest volume strikers ever, but he's still right there with you. And he's also just a very patient fighter. So Ilya's style is not really like this high output. He's kind of like a Gervonta Davis in the sense that, like, Gervonta Davis will only have thrown 13 punches by the time you're in the 4th round with him or 5th round with him. You know what I mean? He's one of these very patient guys, perfect technique. And he's always sort of he'll find that moment. He's good enough to find that moment. And again, the knocking out Volkanovski thing is a pure skill thing. Like, it's just his ability to sort of trap Volkanovski up against the fence with a 3-piece combination and then kind of trap his glove and land the right hook. I mean, that stuff's just so high level. Same thing with Max Holloway. It was just a matter of time before he rocked Max and got him out of there. I mean, this guy is just unbelievable when it comes to his boxing. And then, of course, his wrestling, his grappling. I mean, Ilia Topuria, even though he's not necessarily shown it in his last couple of fights that much, even though he took down Max got right back up. Ilia Topuria, we know, has a great submission game. We know has pretty good ground and pound, really good offensive wrestling. I mean, his takedowns are good. His control is pretty good. And I can't wait to see him grapple more, but Ilia Topuria has to be on this list, in my opinion. I mean, there's a reason why a lot of people think that he is the one person that could potentially finish Islam Makhachev, and it's just because of how OP this guy is on the feet, how skilled his boxing is. And, of course, we know he's well-rounded when it comes to the grappling, so I believe that he's on this list as well. We also have Jon Jones, all right? Jon Jones is, in my opinion, the most skilled heavyweight, light heavyweight that there's ever been, and the only guy that's in those weight classes that is going to make this list. We know Jon Jones is really good on the ground, some of the best ground and pound ever, has a submission game, really good defensive grappling, great wrestling, great control, but I think people really underrate Jon Jones's striking, okay? Because a lot of hardcore fans throughout the last few years have kind of gotten comfortable in saying things like, well, Jones is a wrestler for the most part. Well, if you actually look at Jon Jones's career, I guarantee you about 70% of his in-octagon time has been spent striking with people and dominating them on the feet. All right, we've seen Jon Jones pick people apart, shut them down, and embarrass them and nullify them to, what Anthony Smith was in their fight. Gustafsson in the rematch just got completely embarrassed on the feet. He was in the clinch, just beating up Glover Teixeira. I mean, I think Jon Jones' striking is incredibly underrated. It really is. Yes, he's been outstruck by Dominic Reyes. That wasn't his best performance, but I think overall, taking into account how well-rounded he is, his creativity on the feet as well, how his boxing definitely lacks, but this guy's kicking game is elite. He's so good at mixing up the targets, making his opponents just confused as to what's coming next. Of course, a master at keeping range. I think his striking is criminally underrated. And no, that doesn't mean he is going to go out there and knock out Tom Aspinall in the first round with a big right hand, but it means that, listen, I think he's the most creative and intelligent, high output kickboxer in the upper weight classes. Outside of obviously a few people, maybe like Alex Pereira, those type of fighters are out there, right? But I think that Jones, man, this guy is really, really good on the feet. Nowadays, he's getting older, but mix that with the grappling, all the finishes on the ground that he's had in his career, out wrestling Daniel Cormier in moments, an Olympic wrestler, very impressive, great ground and pound. So I think Jones, obviously has to be on here. He kind of does have, the skill set of a lighter fighter in these heavier weight classes, which is just so rare. So Jon Jones is obviously going to make this list. We also have Demetrious Johnson. Obviously, this was going to make the list. DJ is probably, top 3 most skilled fighters ever. I know I'm not ranking these guys from, most skilled to the 10th most skilled, but DJ would probably be top 3, if not maybe the most skilled. Okay, Demetrious Johnson, I think his clinch game alone is one of the best clinch games we've ever seen in MMA history. The only other fighters that I can think of with insanely elite clinch striking are guys like Anderson Silva, Islam Makhachev, but Demetrious Johnson's clinch striking is even better than these other fighters. I mean, we saw what he was doing to Henry Cejudo. He TKO'd him, starting with those nasty knees in the clinch. In his last few fights in ONE FC against Moraes, we saw him just picking Moraes apart in the clinch, the much bigger fighter. Elite clinch game, solid at range, good boxing, amazing kicks, and then, of course, his wrestling, his grappling, the flying arm bars. Demetrious Johnson's just so unbelievably well-rounded. He can do everything. Good defensively on the ground. Amazing offensively as well with his submission game, with his jiu-jitsu, with his takedown entries. And, of course, the striking is up there, too, the clinch striking. So, yeah, DJ has to be in the mix. Also just really good at finding reads and capitalizing off of people's mistakes. So, Demetrious Johnson, he's up there, too. Islam Makhachev, obviously, is going to make this list as well. The most well-rounded lightweight ever. Okay, Islam Makhachev is definitely making this list. Amazing clinch game, really good clinch striking, but also just really good kickboxing in general. Really good hands, good counter striking, great kicks, but also when it comes to his defensive striking, he hardly gets hit clean. I mean, that's another thing that's really good about Makhachev is that he does a really good job at not getting hit that often. Statistically, he used to be the most defensively sound fighter ever just a few fights ago. Since then, he's had a bit of a war with Dustin and a good fight with Volkanovski, but he's still in the mix for that. But obviously, the grappling too, the submission game, the wrestling and judo up against the fence, the control on the ground, fight IQ is there as well. He can make adjustments. So, yeah, Islam Makhachev, high-level striking, high-level clinch game. Defensive grappling is obviously really good too. And, of course, the submission game. And last but not least, Petr Yan. I think Petr Yan is the most skilled bantamweight ever. We talked about Volkanovski. Volkanovski doesn't have a submission game, right? We've not really seen a whole lot of it, or at least he's not shown us a submission game in the UFC. Petr Yan's the same way, but when it comes to the grappling, Petr Yan's one of the most underrated grapplers in MMA history, right? I think maybe even more underrated than Volk, because I still see people saying things like, Petr Yan can't wrestle. Brother, this guy only beat Petr Yan because he couldn't wrestle. It's an overrated win. Dude, Petr Yan is one of the best wrestlers in that division offensively, not just defensively. Like, this is the guy that took down Aljo 7 times in their first fight. People forget, man, but he took down Aljo in the rematch that he lost and had an entire round where he was controlling Aljo. All right? So people freaking forget about that. The takedowns on Song Yadong, slamming O'Malley all over the octagon with the takedowns there as well. The takedowns, the Osotogari trips on Davison Figueiredo. This guy's hitting Osotogaris on some of the most skilled grapplers in the sport, dude. Davison Figueiredo, lighter man skill with amazing grappling. Aljo. Dude, he took down Merab a few times too, man. And defensive wrestling. Dude, come on, man. Listen, Yan is a fucking maestro defensively as well. Some of the best takedown defense. So it's comical when people say things like Petr Yan doesn't have great wrestling because he got his back taken for 2 rounds against Aljamain Sterling, which is just like, of course, Aljo's one of the best control grapplers ever. One of the most skilled grapplers ever. But Petr Yan's wrestling is on point. And also, like, we saw Aljo struggle to take down O'Malley. Yan arguably had the easiest takedowns out of anyone that's fought O'Malley. Of course, Merab took him down a few times, but dude, Petr Yan effortlessly was taking this guy down. All right? And now we can talk about the striking. We saw what he just did to Figgy. We saw what he did to O'Malley. Right? O'Malley, oh man, O'Malley on the feet, man. O'Malley on the feet, man. Dude, Petr Yan was slipping, dipping, and fucking ripping over the top with big ones. Yeah! Yeah, son! Dude, I fucking love Petr Yan, man. If I could get another Petr Yan title win and title reign, like, that would just be amazing, all right? But Petr Yan slipping, dipping, and ripping against O'Malley, fucking whipping him up with the switch kicks to the body. We talk about the clinch striking too. This guy's nasty in the clinch. We saw him just landing nasty uppercuts and knees against Figueiredo flying knees and spinning back fists into hammer fists against Corey the Sandman. Petr Yan's a motherfucking genius in the octagon. He is a literal technical maestro. I think he maybe has the deepest tool bag out of anyone. The only thing missing are the submissions. This is kind of why I talked about Khabib and Khamzat. They're one-dimensional. They're the only somewhat one-dimensional fighters on this list. You know, I know Khamzat has a striking game. I get it. But my point is, like, we talk about deep tool bags. Khabib's tool bag on the ground is just so deep. Of course, he does so much that's good on the ground that I still consider that to be, like, well-rounded in itself. Okay, because you have grapplers that are considered one-dimensional, where all they do is hold people on the ground and do nothing with it. Then you have people like Khabib. But Petr Yan, he's got wrestling. He's got good ground and pound. He's got some of the best entries and some of the best takedowns. His wrestling defense is there, and the striking, dude, the boxing, some of the best hands ever. Okay, I think he's maybe the second best boxer we've ever seen in the sport. But then you have flashy techniques too, you know, like Volk, amazing striker, well-rounded striker, good kicks, good boxing. But he doesn't have like the same sort of spinning back kicks and flying knees and spinning back fists into overhands like Petr Yan has. Petr Yan has like a good basics game where he can jab you and he can just stick behind his basics with leg kicks as well. But he has also just got these like really good switch kicks to the body, spinning back kicks to the body, knee stomps, flying knees, spinning back fists, spinning wheel kicks. He has everything. And everything is done with perfect technique. I can't stress that enough. Like, this is another thing that I have to mention about most of these fighters. Aldo, perfect technique. Khamzat Chimaev on the ground, perfect technique. Right? Ilia Toporia's boxing, perfect technique. Volk, Khabib, these guys, Demetrious Johnson, Islam. Even though Islam's technique on the feet is very, very good. It may not be the best ever, but it's very good. On the ground, perfect technique. Petr Yan, I think, may have the best technique out of anyone on the feet. Okay? Because it's not just his boxing, it's also his kicks. Right? So, yeah. Yan, I mean, dude, Yan might be, like, again, Yan has lost some fights. There are some holes in his game where, like, people can control him and people can, like, maybe take him down and pressure him a little bit, but like, I just think this guy is arguably maybe the most skilled fighter ever. But, you know, you also have an argument for DJ there. But yeah, Yan is in this list. A couple more honorable mentions. Charles Oliveira is definitely another honorable mention. We know how good Charles is on the ground. Some of the best grappling ever. But his wrestling game, offensive wrestling, is underrated. People underrate it. Look at what he did to Michael Chandler. You can't really tell me that, oh, Michael Chandler's old. Michael Chandler is a fucking wrestler. That's his base. I know he's a slugger for the most part these days, but like, his base is wrestling, okay? He's an amazing grappler, and Charles was taking him down effortlessly. Charles's double leg is really good. We also know that his submission game is elite. And his striking, Muay Thai, very, very good. So Charles Oliveira, another guy that has to be mentioned. And I think the same thing can be said for Roman Dolidze. I think Roman Dolidze just really well-rounded, double threat. Who is another fighter that should definitely be brought up when we're talking about this? Arman Tsarukyan. Yeah, I think Arman maybe, he's in a similar convo to Umar, right? I think Arman's grappling, I think he might be one of the best grapplers in history. I bet skill-wise, if you're going to bring up the top 10 grapplers in MMA history, and you were to ask like an AI bot that knows MMA perfectly, that can literally calculate it. I know it's not really something you can really calculate, but skill-wise, Arman Tsarukyan's grappling is up there. Like, it's just elite. And his striking is getting pretty good as well, right? So, Arman, that's another fighter. Again, people are going to be like, Arman, whoa, Arman. What about Teddy Roosevelt? Man, they're going to be bringing up fucking 90s guy. Teddy Roosevelt's, I know he's not a 90s old president back in the day, but like, dude, they're going to be bringing up fucking Woodrow Wilson. They're going to be bringing up fucking old heads over Arman, all right? You know, who else? They're going to be bringing up fucking Sean Shirk. Dude, not Arman. Sean Shirk was an absolute monster, man. He did the monster mash. Yeah. Like, Sean Shirk was better than Arman. What about Tony? What about Tony the T-Ferg, man? I think Arman's a little bit more skilled, okay? A little bit more skilled. Either way, these are the most skilled fighters ever. Let me know if you guys enjoyed the video. Until next time.